Hello and welcome back to our course, Learn How to Program. Today we are going to be talking about classes. This is part 6. So this is the course outline so far. We've talked about what is programming and why is programming important. We've talked about variables. We've talked about if statements, booleans, functions, for loops, lists, logical operators, and today about classes. If you want to check out any of these videos, the past videos, just check out the description and then there will be links for all of them in there. But today we're going to focus on classes. What are classes? Well, classes can serve many different purposes, way too many to cover in a short amount of time. But there's two things that I want to highlight today. We will highlight two ways you can use classes in this course. So the first is going to be to hold data, and then the second is going to be to perform actions. So what does that actually look like? Well, you've actually seen classes before in the form of, for example, integer or string, but now we're going to create custom classes because at some point you kind of get tired of using strings and integers and you actually want to build something on your own that fits your specific needs as a programmer and that solves a specific problem. So for example, you could create a class called book. And what would the purpose of the book class actually be? Well, storing info about a book, like let's say the author, the title, the year published, the genre, the rating of the book, how good the book actually was. As you can see right here, the purpose of the int class was storing a number for us, and the purpose of a string class was storing a string. So this would actually be hold data. That's something that we've talked about already. But another purpose of a class, which we've kind of done also, is to perform certain functions, certain tasks. So for example, you could create a class called BookSelector. So what does this actually do? Well, it's a class that specializes finding the best book for you. So for example, maybe that's based on the rating of the book. So if it has a really high rating, it will select the book for you, which is something that we're actually going to build here together. So when you store data in a class, instead of just calling it a variable, we actually call it a field. So these variables are then bound to that class. So whenever you instantiate the class, which is a very important keyword, whenever you create a new book, for example, let's say we just call it book 1, you are going to populate it with, for example, the title, the year published, the author, and all of that data right there. Those are actually fields. So whenever a class holds a variable, it is called a field. So let's just actually break this down a little bit. So you could have a class, the book class, for example, where the field name was title, so the very first row here. And the type was string. And then the example data, the example string that you have is, for example, Animal Farm. The next one would be genre, and then rating, and then author, and then year published. As you can see, these are all different variables, but they all actually belong to the book class. And you could create many different kinds of books. You could create a book about the old man and the sea. You could instantiate one referring to the Grapes of Wrath, all kinds of books. You could just make up all of this data yourself. So yes, wow, a class can actually store a lot. You could create just an unlimited, basically, number of fields. That's actually not possible in a lot of programming languages. Some might actually allow that, but for a lot of languages, you're bound to, for example, I don't know, 15, 20, it depends on the language. But class names, fields, and methods are really only limited by your imagination. So you could have a class with, for example, I don't know, it could be called wardrobe, or it could be called video games. Like you might create a program where you keep track of your favorite video games or what video games you have in your collection, for example. That could also be a class. And here's some more thoughts on classes. Well, they add order to our programs and are used to communicate to other developers what the intention of the original programmer was. So we could use pairs like we've used before. We could use strings like we've used before. But the thing is with classes is, one, they are named. So for example, the book class, you know that it's about books, but also they allow you to kind of encapsulate, which is a very, it's a word that programmers love to use. They allow you to encapsulate your data which is to say that you kind of give your variables, your fields, a home inside of the class, and then to actually create actions, to create methods that act on those fields in that class. So we're going to break that down. We're going to go through some examples really soon of what that actually looks like in a practical manner. So wait, you actually forgot about methods. Well, actually I didn't. Methods are the name that we give functions that are connected to a specific class. So we've built so many functions before. So the thing with a method is that it's just a function that belongs to a specific class. So for example, you could have a book class with a display method that just pretty prints. It prints stuff out in a really nice way. It prints out your book information in a really nice way. And that could be done through the display method that can only be used if you're using the book class. So again, we're going to go through what all of this looks like practically in a couple minutes. So here's the example I just gave you. So the method name for the book class could be display, for example. And the purpose is to print out book info. And you could create a method that prints out something like this. Title was written by author and its genre is genre. It was published in year published. You've seen all this kind of stuff before in a function, but now we're just giving this a new home. We're kind of encapsulating it in a new home in a class. So this is what we're going to build. It's going to be something where we're going to create a class. We're going to give it some info. We're going to instantiate the class, which is to say we're going to create a variable of type book. And then we're going to create a display method that is going to do this. It is going to print out the book info in a really nice manner. So enough talking about classes and methods and fields and how all of that stuff fits together. We are actually going to get to some coding now. So like previous weeks, we are going to do all of our coding in IntelliJ. So follow along with me. Let's go to this guy right here, this link. It will take you to here. As always, you can either do this via the browser through the Kotlin Playground website, or you can copy and paste this into IntelliJ, which is the preferred way of actually doing things. So we are going to take this right here and then copy it, and then open up your IntelliJ Community Edition. Right here, you are going to right click, go to New, and then create a Kotlin file /class. And let's just write blank exercises part 6.kt. Excellent. And then paste it in there. And now let's just verify that it works by adding in like a println hello world. And then hit on play. And then this usually just takes a second. And there you go. So in these exercises, the goal of these exercises actually is to create a couple different classes. The first class is going to be called a book class, and that's going to hold information about, you guessed it, books. The second class is going to be called BookSelector. And what that's going to do is, given a list of books, it's going to select the book with the highest rating. But first, we need to actually build the book class. So what does that actually look like? Well, just kind of follow along right here, and then I'll explain after I type some stuff out. So this is how you declare the actual class. So the class needs some fields that we're going to fill with data. And how you do that is you type in val. You could also use var, but in our case, we're not going to do that. Let's just type in title for now, like this. So as you can see, this lives outside of this main function right here. So this has its own universe, its own little domain right now. But we can actually call this from the main function right here, from within this block. And when we call this, what we're actually doing is we're instantiating it. So let's just say book 1 right here. So this is a variable called book 1, and this is going to be equal to book. But as you can see right here, we need to actually give it a title. So let's give it the title Animal Farm, for example. So we've already done a lot of stuff. We've created a data class, which is a specialized kind of class in Kotlin for holding and retrieving data, which is super cool. I really like it. And then we've instantiated it. So actually, this is really no different than what we've done before with strings, where let's say you were to do this, and then that actually did not work out like I expected it to, but this is actually of type string. So then if we investigate this, we'll see that the type of this variable right here is string, which is actually a class. And this is actually the instantiation of something from the string class, which is just a fancy term for saying that you're creating one of them, right? So you can have many different kinds of strings. You can create many different kinds of strings, but they all belong to the string class. Just like books, you can have many different kinds of books and many specific books with specific titles, but they all eventually lead back to this book class. And that's kind of what instantiation actually means. You're just making a copy of something of this type, of the book type, or it could be string, or it could be int, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so the thing is, we need to actually fill this with title, author, genre, year published, and rating. So this is actually pretty simple to do. If we just create a new line right here, we could do author, which you probably imagined correctly is supposed to be a string. Genre, that would also be a string. Year published, we could make that an int. So then that would be year published. And that would be that right there. And then we are missing the rating, which we will make a double because we want it to have a decimal point. So rating. And then let's make this double. And now, as you can see right here, this is red, right? Because it's saying there's no value passed for parameter author, genre, rating, or year published. So all you really need to do is to grab this right here. I've already pre-formatted all of this stuff for you, so that would be super easy. And then copy and paste it. Make sure that your parentheses is closed. And then you're all done. Pretty cool, huh? So now you've instantiated a book, which comes from the class book. I know that sounds kind of stupid, but let's actually see what we have here. So if we type in book 1, now, as you can see, we have all of these different fields, which we ourselves have actually created, which is super cool. So if we were to run this program right now, you're actually not really going to see anything. Just this hello world down here, which we should get rid of. But if I print it out, what you should see is book1.rating. That should be 4.5 out of 5. Let's just rerun this. And boom shakalaka, 4.5. And if we type in, for example, book1.title, then what we expect to see is the title. Very cool. And we can actually instantiate, meaning create other books as well. So we could create book 2, and then you call book right here. And then to instantiate it, you just throw in all of the variables, all of the fields that it needs, or all of the values for the variables that you want. Make sure that your parentheses are opened and closed. And now we have a second book. So I could just copy this right here, paste it, and then change these to 2. And now let's just type in book 2 just to see some sort of separation between these things. And then rerun. And there you go. So you have the first book, 4.5, Animal Farm, and then the second book, Grapes of Wrath, with a rating of 4.4. And that's exactly what we wanted to do in the first part of these exercises. So I hope that all made sense so far. Basically, a data class is a special kind of class that is meant for holding and retrieving data. And you can create all of your fields like this, and then you instantiate it by just calling the name of the class, throwing in the values that it needs, and then you can use this variable however you want to use this variable. It's super cool. But now let's say, let's take a look at, so we finished this one. So this right here said create several different instances of the book class and fill it with sampled data. So actually, let's go ahead and finish this. So let's, this should be super easy, and I will try not to waste any time with this. So we just go book like this, and we're going to go ahead and fill up everything with some data because we're going to use everything later on anyways. Okay, great. And now we just have one more book to go, book 4. And then let's grab this right here, The Old Man and the Sea. A great book, by the way. Copy and paste it. And then boom, we are actually done. So we finished part 1, which was to create the data class. And then we finished part 2. And now let's go on to part 3. So in part 3, it says create a method in the book class that displays info about the book. Title was written by author and its genre is genre. It was published in year published. So how do we actually do this? Well, actually, what you can do is besides just holding data and retrieving data, you can create methods in classes, which we just talked about in the actual slides. Method is just the name that you give a function that is bound to a specific class. So only members of the class book are able to use it. So let me translate that from gibberish to something that you might understand. Let's open up braces here. So an opening and a closing brace. And let's go ahead and type in something like display. All right. So, and then let's type in print line. And then I'm inside the class. Now what I want you guys to do is, and you've done this before, is just to create another function over here, also called display. But I want this one to say, I am not inside the class. So what I want you to try now in this area right here is just to type in display. Now, which display do you think this is going to refer to? This display right here or this one right here? Let's just run it and see what happens. Oh, it says I am not inside the class. Well, that's actually because this display can only be run on something of type book. So right now, it's actually pointing to this function right here and not to this book. But I bet if we were to take one of our books and type in display, look at that. This display belongs to the class of type book, and then it goes into here. So let's just rerun this, and then you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. I'm inside the class. Look at that. Really good. But we're still not done. We need to actually finish this out. So we've done stuff like this before, except that instead of doing this in a function, we're doing this in a method inside of this class. So all you really need to do is to copy and paste what I did earlier, like so. And then it's just using the template replacement stuff. So title will be title, author will be author, yada, yada, yada. And now when I hit book 1 display, what you should see is Animal Farm was written by George Orwell and its genre is political satire. It was published in 1945. Look at that. Super cool. But let's try displaying a few more so that you don't take just my word for it. So now we should see 4 different books being displayed. Look at that. Look how versatile that is. That is just super cool. So that was an example of a method inside of a class. Really good job, guys. So now let's move on to exercise 4. So like I mentioned before, classes can have tons of different kinds of functions, or uses actually. Uses is a better word for it. I don't want us to get mixed up with the word function. So we can also create classes not only to hold data, but also to perform certain actions with data. So let's create another class up here called BookSelector. So this class is not going to have any fields inside of it. So we don't actually even need these, the parentheses. So now what we actually need to do is it says create a method in BookSelector that takes in a list of books and returns the book with the highest rating. That's super interesting. So let's just first take a look at the books. Let's see what we have here. So we have 4 different books And the book with the highest rating is The Old Man and the Sea. By the way, I made up these ratings because these are classic books and none of them should actually have ratings. They're all fantastic. But this one has the highest rating. So we should create a function that when called will take a list of books and then return this book right here. So that's really interesting. So what we need to do is to create a method, like I said down here. Remember, a method is just a function that is bound to a class. So let's type in find highest rated book. And now here's the really cool part. So you know how before, whenever we wanted to, for example, work with a list of strings in a function, you had to type in something like, my list and then list of strings, right? And then this list in here would be of type string. So just to confirm that, let me show you. Yeah, so this is of type string. I just hit F1 and then it tells me exactly what type it is. Now we can actually use a custom class. We can use this book class, which actually refers to none other than our own book class that we have just invented. Look how cool that is. So we could do something like, let's take the my list and let's do a for each, which we've done many times before in the class. And then let's just do a print line and then display. Now we can get rid of these guys right here. So what I've done actually is now, given this list of books, I want to loop through it, and then for each one, talk to this display function right here, which will print out this. Look how cool that is. So let's actually go ahead and call this. So there's two parts that need to be done here. So the first part that needs to be done, whenever you're working with a class, if you want to use it, you have to instantiate it. So let's just instantiate this. So this is just the name of my variable on the left. So remember, this could be anything, my variable, right? But we are going to call it BookSelector, just to be nice and neat and tidy. And this is how you actually instantiate it. So now this guy right here is ready for action. You can actually use this now. So now if we type in BookSelector and then dot, we will find our method. Isn't that super cool? But our method actually needs a list of books. But look at here, we have 4 books. So let's just type in books like this, and let's just create the list. So list of, and then book 1, book 2, book 3, and then book 4. And now let's feed the method these books. Oops. Okay. And now if we rerun, look at that. Grapes of Wrath was written. Yeah, works perfectly, except we're getting this Kotlin unit thing, which I'm not 100% sure why that is showing up at the moment. Oh, I know exactly why that's showing up. Because we're doing a println, and then we're also doing a println inside of here. So it actually doesn't even need the println right here. Just get rid of that, rerun it, and then this Kotlin.unit is totally gone. Don't worry about that. Okay, excellent. Everything is working exactly as we want it to. Super cool. Really nice job, guys. But now we actually need to do this BookSelector thing. So we need to actually find the highest rated book. So luckily for us, if you have a list, a lot of this kind of stuff is already done for you in Kotlin. So you don't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how in the world would I actually do this. What you can do is, well, first let's actually make this a little bit nicer. Let's call this books, right? And now if you take a look, books is of type list, right? It's a list of books. And then you have all of these really cool things that you can actually use if something is of type list. And one of them is max by. So how this works is you select one of the fields. So it could be rating, genre, year published, author, title. and it will find the max values. It will find the one that has the highest value. So if it's a string, it's going to do this alphabetically, but if it's a number, it's going to find the highest number. So for example, rating right here. And to actually find this, yeah, okay, perfect. So now what I want to do is I want to create a variable out of this, create a single variable. So this would be highest rated book. Okay, excellent. And now let's print out highest rated book. But actually, and this is something that's going to be a little bit new for us, this is actually using this exclamation point right here. So what that actually means is this value could be nullable. And you're probably wondering right now, what the heck is nullable? So nullable is something that's been around for a long time. So nullable actually kind of means there's no value, or nothing has kind of been found. It's kind of a relic of the past, and it's something that Java has. And since Kotlin has to interact a lot with Java, they've kind of built it into the Kotlin language. So what that actually means is it is possible for this value to be null. So what does null actually look like? So null, let's just type in right here, null. Okay. And so this is what this actually means, if I can get this correct. So this, what this actually means right here is we're using a var, which means that we can actually change this variable whenever we want. And then when I actually do a print line of this with a null value, okay, so this is of type string, that's nullable. Let's get rid of this for now. I am going to just run through this. What we are going to see happen is that it's going to print out this null. But I could also say, since we made this a var, I'm going to overwrite this. And I'm going to say that this is now, I don't know, the value Peter. Okay, so now if I actually rerun this, the value is now Peter. But as a programmer, you don't necessarily know if this value is going to be null or not. So you have to do something called null handling. So the classical way of doing this is actually just to go if null value is equal to null, then type in I am null, else, let's just copy and paste this right here, I am, and then let's just type in null value. So I don't really want you guys to get hung up on this too much. It is a really important thing. But if you don't quite understand what null is, no worries. A lot of professional programmers don't really understand what null is sometimes if you just look at their code. Okay, so as you can see right here, this says I am Peter, right? So the value was not null, so it went into here. But now let's say that I change this to actually null right here. And then I actually played this. This says now I am null. So really, it's a value that can be either null, right? This guy right here, or it can be a string. That's kind of what I want you guys to get out of this. So this max by returns something of type book. Oh, sorry, guys. This actually returns something of type, let's just run F1 on this. So highest rated book. F1 of book that could be nullable, meaning if it doesn't find anything, this guy right here will actually be null. So let me show you that that actually is the case. So let's print out highest rated book. Okay. And now instead of feeding it this list of books right here, we are going to feed it an empty list. Whoops. All right, this actually needs to know what type this is right here. So just follow along. Don't worry too much if you don't get this part. It's just for an example. So let's rerun this. And as you can see, this is null because no books have been given to us. right? So I printed out this guy right here, and this is null. So now if we go back to what we had before and rerun this, here's the book, right? So the value could be null or it could be book. That's basically the summary of what we just did in the last few minutes of that. So look at that, super cool. So what do we want to do in the case that there are no books? Well, that's a super interesting question, because a lot of times as a programmer, you don't necessarily have a lot of control over what's coming in, right? So maybe a different programmer wrote it. Maybe this comes from a database. Maybe the database, like everything got deleted, right? And then let's say that you print something out and you print out a null value for the customer. That's kind of not like super cool. And it can also lead to errors, which we're not really going to discuss here in this course. But here's something that is kind of cool. So what you can do is, if in the case that this highest rated book is null, let's just return a blank book. So this isn't the most elegant solution, but it is a solution. A book where all of the values are just blank, they're predefined, but at least it's not null. And then otherwise, let's return our highest rated book. So then, oh, sorry guys, we need to actually return something here of type book. Okay, excellent. And then this guy should be highest rated book. This should be returned, and this should be returned, because that's what we want right here. We want to return something of type book. And now if I actually rerun this, what you're going to see is, well, we need to actually output this guy's value, right? So we've returned it, but we haven't printed it out yet. Let's print it out. So let's also rename this to something a little bit better. So highest rated book. Let's rerun this. And then cool, here's our book. But let's make it even better. Let's actually display it nicely, because remember we have this method right here for displaying it nicely. Let's rerun this. And then The Old Man and the Sea was written by Ernest Hemingway, and its genre is literary fiction. We don't actually need this println anymore. It was published in 1952. All right, excellent. Super good job, guys. Let me get rid of this Kotlin unit thing. Yeah, so now kind of the last part about this is, let me convince you that this null thing actually worked. So let's say that we have now this empty list, which we feed into this find highest rated books. What you should see now is, instead of null like before, you will see this kind of like really poorly done text right here, which is still better than a null value, but we could actually do something like blank, 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 just so you can see that values actually make it in there. Blank, blank, blank was written by blank, blank, blank. All right, you get the point. Basically, we just want to make sure that if something goes wrong and we can't find anything, that we have a backup option. All right, guys, I will now see you in the summary. Good job. So really nice job, guys. I know that wasn't easy, but here's a summary of what we've just done in this lesson. Classes can serve many different purposes. One of them is storing data in the form of fields, and another is performing actions in the form of methods. Fields are variables that belong to a class. Methods are nothing more than functions that are bound to specific classes, like that display method that we talked about, or the find highest rated book method that we also talked about in the BookSelector class.